Hi there, welcome to Gaining Vision. I'm Melanie. Thanks so much for clicking. To my returning subscribers, thank you for your continuous love and support. If you're new to the channel, welcome. Please feel at home. If you enjoy my content, I encourage you to hit that subscribe button and please don't forget to like and share. But if my content's not for you, that's okay too. I encourage you to find another channel that's more suited for you. I always enjoyed listening to Minister Pandor of South Africa. She is so well-spoken, articulate, and is very knowledgeable. It was no different in the interview I came across at the G20, where she was being interviewed by an interviewer from India. The interviewer started off nice and soft. How was your stay? How are your accommodation? And how was the G20? Minister Pandor answered clearly, concisely.
How are you doing? How do you like New Delhi? And how's your experience of the G20 summit in New Delhi been so far?
Well, the stay in New Delhi has been wonderful, and the arrangements by the leadership of India have been really excellent. The deliberations have been very, very good, very focused. The themes have been addressed. So I think all in all, this is a great triumph for India.
And of course, pleasantly, definitely being politically correct in all her answers. But then the interviewer started to get crafty, I'd say. She thought she could pull some fast ones. As her questions continued, she started to ask open-ended questions. She was professional, allowing Minister Pandor to answer the questions, but she thought she was sneaky. She wanted to get some dirt from Minister Pandor. But I don't think she'll be achieving this. But some of the examples that she asked, again, was about how the G20 actually went this time. And Minister Pandor answered beautifully.
What was the highlight of the last 2 days for you?
Well, I think, first of all, the fact that much of the deliberations had consensus shaping them, which I think has been very important because in the last 2 years, we've seen a great fracture in the global community, with us almost being divided, given the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, and seeming to be compelled to make a choice between the two, which as part of the developing community, we felt we couldn't make such a choice. Our choice is for peace. It's for bringing countries together. And so to choose one in a conflict appeared to take a side for greater insecurity, and we were not comfortable with that. And I think the character of this G20 has been to bring us back on the core focus that has always been the subject of the G20, which is development, and particularly looking at economic growth for emerging and developing countries.
This time she talked about how it was a great experience, we're back on track, and there was a lot of consensus. Previous years, there was a lot of focus on the war between Ukraine and Russia, and they weren't focusing on what the G20 was developed for. Minister Pandor used this as an example to say that it was a positive experience, including that there were many successes from the G20. The interviewer asked questions about how decisions were made and how people were coming together for the consensus, and actually gave credit to South Africans for helping lead that. But Minister Pandor is humble and kind, and she gave credit to all of the people involved, including those from India and other members of the Brics.
Would you give credit to India's presidency for that?
I think it's been really difficult, but India carried it extremely well. Credit to the Sherpa, credit to the foreign minister, and credit to His Excellency the Prime Minister.
It's so important for Minister Pandor to not take the shining light of South Africa all the time, but to take credit where it's due and also include all of those. The interviewer started to want more, so she started to ask very pointed questions, including how they were talking about the statement they put out and Ukraine's perspective on it. Ukraine felt that there wasn't anything special about it. And Minister Pandor was very politically correct and said that Ukraine stands for all of the Charter of Rights for the United Nations, and that's what the statement covered all of those. The interviewer said, but Ukraine wanted to come and speak to the G20, but they weren't allowed. And Minister Pandor said, well, Ukraine is not a member of the G20. That would be as if we would offer all countries, including those in Africa, that have conflict to come and present. We don't do that at the G20. It's important for international organizations to stick to their mandates and focus on what they do.
Do you think Ukraine should have been invited to the G20?
Ukraine is not a member of the G20, and it's not been the practice to invite, external countries to come to the G20 and almost make a submission. We are very pleased that the African Union has become a permanent part, and again we credit and thank India for that decision having been made. But I don't think that it would be appropriate to have a situation where one country that has a conflict then believes it should be invited. Should we be inviting Mozambique, which has got terrorist attacks? Should we be inviting Mali, which has had a coup, or Burkina Faso? If we don't invite them, why? Is it because they're African, and so the conflicts they experience don't matter? So I think we have to be very measured in how we approach international organizations and participation within them.
She said that they did address, obviously, the war with Ukraine and Russia, but also focused on the items on the agenda for the G20 about developing countries and how they can partner and work together for a better world for everybody. The interviewer also started to ask a lot of questions about Brics and mentioned the fact that the Chinese president traveled all the way to South Africa for the Brics summit, as well as how it went and how the members interacted, including the Prime Minister of India and the Chinese president. Minister Pandor let her know that yes, they did, and it was a great success, and everybody got along very well, and how welcome the Prime Minister of India was, and how many South Africans wanted him to come back.
We want to know about the chemistry that President Ramaphosa shares with Prime Minister Modi.
I think they have a lovely chemistry. We were so thrilled that Prime Minister came to the Brics Summit. And, a lot of our people want him to come back, so we have invited that he should come for an official visit to South Africa. We had some of our citizens, as you know, South Africa has one of the largest, if not the largest, Indian originating population on the African continent. And the citizens from Durban, a large city with many of our Indian compatriots, had traveled all the way to Johannesburg and stood outside the venue of the summit just to see Prime Minister Modi. So there's a great deal of interest in him, and we would like him to spend more time in South Africa.
But she also kept being asked by the interviewer about China and the president. Well, he didn't come to the G20. Is that a snub? Why didn't he come to India and he went to South Africa? And Minister Pandor assured her that it was not because there was any conflict between the two. In fact, at Brics, they spent a lot of time having in-depth conversations, and they got along very, very well.
There's been a lot of talk about Chinese President Xi Jinping, who traveled all the way to South Africa for the BRICS summit, but chose not to come to New Delhi for the G20. Was his absence disappointing for you? Do you think it was a missed opportunity for China at a time when their economy is going through a rather difficult phase?
I really don't believe I'm competent to comment on the President of China's attendance. Many leaders miss many meetings, and I really think we should leave it at that. I was very pleased in South Africa to observe President Xi and Prime Minister Modi having quite detailed discussion together. And I think that's good, because we need to challenge this notion that India and China at loggerheads. They're very significant parts of the economy of the world, and it's important that we see them working together.
And the interviewer wanted to know what was said, and Minister Pandor was cute. She said, I couldn't get my ear close enough to figure out exactly what it was, but they were very amicable. I love that. When the interviewer asked more questions about the Western world, about Brics, that France wanted to be invited but weren't. And Minister Pandor answered simply, they asked to attend late in the game, as well as the members of BRICS decided that it wasn't the right fit. There was no time on the agenda.
The French president wanted to attend the BRICS summit in South Africa. Why did you not invite him?
We didn't think that there was really a theme or place for him in our deliberations, and we had a great deal of business to get through. The interest came rather late, and the members, fortunately, of BRICS, our practice is we decide matters on consensus. So the chair, President Ramaphosa, consulted all his colleagues, and there wasn't any sense that all five wished to have the President of France there.
I love the fact that Minister Pandor, although the interviewer was trying to pull some stuff out of her to get her to speak up against certain things, including the connection between BRICS and the Western world. And Minister Pandor set the interviewer straight. We all feel it's very important for us to have those connections with the Western world because we do a lot of trade with them. There's no separation. It's just the fact that in these talks, it's about the BRICS members.
Yesterday we saw the United States, India, South Africa, and Brazil coming together, talking about reaffirming their commitment to the G20, talking about building more multilateral banks and so on. Do you think that some Western powers have begun to see BRICS as a space that they want to be part of?
I get the sense that they would like to talk more to the BRICS leaders, and being here in India gave them the opportunity to really have detailed deliberations with Prime Minister Modi as well as with President Lula da Silva. So they found the BRICS membership here and were able, I think, to have a greater engagement. And I think that that's important because BRICS is significant. It's a large part of the population of the world, significant GDP of the world, so it can't be ignored. And the fact that you had very civil discussions among the various leaders, I think is a good sign.
I know that perhaps the interviewer was looking for something more, a little bit more dirt to pull out, but Minister Pandor wasn't budging. She was professional, cool, calm, and effective the entire time. What I really, really appreciated, though, was as the interviewer kept asking her questions, Minister Pandor also took the opportunity to talk about what is so important for her as the Foreign Affairs Minister for South Africa, the work that still needs to be done, and that's on the United Nations reform. The fact that India and Africa does not have a permanent seat on the Security Council, the fact that Brazil also doesn't, and again, the interviewer wanted to know why it's taking so long for India to get a place, seeing it's the most populous country in the world. Minister Pandor explained it very clearly and concisely that it's not that the fact that China is getting in the way or holding anything back, but it does take time when there's any reform and change, and that it would happen.
It seems the only impediment to India's inclusion as a permanent member to the UNSC is China. Do you, in your deliberations with the Chinese leadership, push for a change here?
I don't think there's an objection from China. We discussed this matter, and it's in our BRICS declaration that countries such as India and Brazil and African countries such as South Africa, although we don't choose ourselves, should have a representation.
And China's on board?
China is part of the declaration of BRICS. So there's been no objection in our meetings to India having a presence on the Security Council.
So what is
certainly
the roadblock?
Not from China.
What is the roadblock then? Why is it, if everyone agrees?
The roadblock is when you introduce the subject of reform, others who are not part of the permanent presence of the Security Council assert their interest. So they piggyback on developing countries. So you'd have Germany, you'd have Japan, and so it muddies the water. And you need to be firm in indicating that what we're talking about is a representation of the excluded and not the increased presence of rich and developed countries.
The interview ended off on a high note that, again, It was a great G20. Everybody was happy. There was a lot accomplished, and they're all heading in the right direction. Minister Pandor is always so well spoken. She's also a great representative of South Africa, and I really wish that she would train all of the other foreign affairs ministers to speak so articulately as she does. And I think the interviewer was a little bit out of luck if she thought she was going to get any dirt out of Minister Pandor. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this interview. Drop your comments below and let's have a conversation. And please don't forget to hit the notification button, like and share, and we'll see you next time. Bye!